The sun hung low on the horizon, casting the sky in hues of amber and violet, as though the heavens themselves had taken to celebrating the moment. Jason stood at the edge of the city's landing bay, a vast open space designed to welcome interstellar visitors, feeling the faint hum of excitement buzz in the air around him. For all his years on Earth, for all the routines that had dulled the edges of his curiosity, there was still something electrifying about meeting someone from the stars. And today that someone was Lyra. He had read the brief about her, a visitor from the distant star system of Nerelthia, humanoid in appearance, but with traits that were, to say the least, exotic. The cultural exchange program had been established just a few years ago, and Jason had been quick to volunteer as a host. The idea of meeting aliens, of learning about their worlds firsthand, was too irresistible. What he hadn't expected was how nervous it would make him feel as he stood there, waiting for her to step off the sleek, pearlescent craft that had just landed. The ship's door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a figure silhouetted against the interior's cool blue light. Jason's breath caught in his throat. As Lyra stepped forward, her iridescent skin shimmered in the fading sunlight, reflecting and refracting the colors of the sky. Her hair, a cascade of silvery threads, seemed to move as though it were alive, catching the light in ways no earthly material ever could. Her eyes, larger than a human's and a striking violet, locked onto Jason's, and he could swear there was a song in the air, a melody that followed her movements, faint but unmistakable. "Jason," she said, her voice carrying that musical cadence he'd read about, every word seeming to resonate with an underlying harmony. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Jason blinked, momentarily stunned. He had prepared himself for a lot of things, but nothing quite like this. Her presence was mesmerizing. It wasn't just her appearance, but the way she seemed to be in tune with everything around her, as if nature itself responded to her. Even her words had a rhythm to them, a gentle rise and fall that made him feel like he was being carried along in some kind of cosmic dance. "Lyra," right he managed, shaking off his awe enough to smile and offer his hand. "Welcome to Earth." She looked at his extended hand for a moment, her head tilting slightly to the side, as if considering the gesture. Then, with a graceful movement, she took it. Her skin was cool to the touch, and there was an energy beneath it, like the faintest hum of electricity. "Thank you for hosting me," she said, her smile wide and genuine. The shifting colors of her skin took on a soft, golden glow, reflecting her mood. "I've studied much about your world, but seeing it firsthand is beyond what I imagined." Jason chuckled, releasing her hand. "Well, don't get too excited just yet. We've got a lot of traffic and bureaucracy to go through first. I hope you don't mind paperwork." Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Paperwork I can handle. It's the subtle art of Earth's humor that intrigues me more." Jason grinned. He liked her already. The first part of the day was filled with formalities, introductions to officials, quick tours of the landing facilities, and briefings on the cultural exchange program's guidelines. Throughout, Lyra remained poised and attentive, though her iridescent skin betrayed her emotions with flashes of soft blues and purples. She absorbed everything with a quiet intensity, asking questions when appropriate but mostly observing, as if every tiny detail of Earth's procedures fascinated her. By the time they left the facility and entered the city proper, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and twilight had settled in, painting the streets in shades of deep blue and silver. The city was alive with the glow of neon signs, the hum of distant traffic, and the chatter of people out for the evening. To Jason it was familiar, almost mundane. But to Lyra, it was as though she had stepped into a new dimension. Her gaze drifted upward, catching the flicker of lights from towering skyscrapers, and then down to the throngs of people moving like rivers through the streets. "Your world is vibrant," she said softly. Her skin, which had been a calm silver moments before, now shimmered with a soft pinkish hue, a sign of wonder. Jason glanced at her, chuckling under his breath. "You're probably used to things being more orderly." "Huh?" "From what I read, Nerelthia is all about structure and precision." Lyra nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the glow of a passing streetlight. "Yes, our cities are built with precision in mind. Every structure has a purpose, every space is calculated for efficiency." But here she gestured around her, her skin shifting to a lavender hue. There's beauty in the chaos, in the unpredictability. Jason couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, unpredictable is definitely one way to describe it. They walked side by side through the city, talking about everything and nothing at once. Jason pointed out the sights, restaurants, parks, the occasional art installation, and Lyra absorbed it all with quiet fascination. She had a way of listening that made Jason feel like every word he said was important, even when he was rambling about something as mundane as Earth's weather patterns. As the night deepened, Jason decided to take her to one of his favorite spots, a rooftop bar that offered a stunning view of the city. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had an atmosphere of easygoing camaraderie, a place where friends could gather and share stories under the stars. They took seats near the edge of the roof, where the city sprawled out beneath them in a sea of lights. Lyra leaned on the railing, her gaze drifting to the stars above. It's strange, she mused, her voice soft, to see the same stars from such a different perspective. Jason looked up as well, following her gaze. You mean they look different from Nerelthia? No, Lyra said, her skin shifting to a soft blue. The stars themselves are the same, but the way you see them here, from your world, it's different. There's a sense of distance, of longing. Jason was silent for a moment, taking in her words. There was something about the way she spoke that made him feel like he was seeing the world through new eyes, like she was unlocking a door in his mind that he hadn't even realized was there. Do you miss it? He asked after a pause. Your home. Lyra smiled, though it was tinged with a faint melancholy. Yes, but I also find joy in discovering new places, new people. Jason nodded, understanding more than he expected to. I get that. I mean, I haven't traveled to different planets or anything, but there's something exciting about seeing the world in a new way, even if it's just a new part of the city. Lyra's gaze met his, her eyes bright with curiosity. And what is it that you seek, Jason? What do you hope to find in this world of yours? Jason blinked, caught off guard by the depth of the question. What did he hope to find? It was a question he hadn't asked himself in a long time. He shrugged, trying to keep it light. I guess. I'm still figuring that out. Lyra regarded him for a moment longer, her expression thoughtful. Then, slowly, her skin shifted to a warm, golden hue. I think that's a journey we all share. As the night wore on, Jason found himself more and more drawn to Lyra. There was something about her presence that felt both calming and exhilarating, like being in the eye of a storm. They talked for hours about Earth, about Nerelthia, about the differences and similarities between their worlds. Every now and then, Lyra's skin would flash with colors that Jason was starting to associate with certain emotions. Pink for wonder, blue for reflection, gold for happiness. By the time they left the rooftop, it was well past midnight, the city quieting as people retreated to their homes. Jason glanced at his watch and then back at Lyra, who still seemed as wide-eyed and curious as when the night had begun. It's getting late, he said. Do you want to call it a night? Lyra hesitated, her skin flickering with a brief mix of colors: pink, silver, a hint of blue. I wouldn't mind continuing the conversation, if that's all right with you. Jason smiled. Yeah, sure. You can crash at my place for the night. It's just a few blocks from here. Lyra's skin shifted again, this time to a soft, glowing gold. Her smile widened, and for a moment, Jason thought he saw something in her eyes, something deeper than the casual excitement of a new experience. But he shrugged it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. Thank you, Jason, Lyra said, her voice warm and melodic. I would be honored. And with that, they headed back to his apartment, unaware of the monumental misunderstanding that had just taken place. Jason awoke to the soft glow of morning light filtering through the blinds, casting delicate, dappled shadows across the room. His head felt slightly heavy, not from alcohol, he hadn't had more than a couple of beers, but from the sheer strangeness of the previous night. Meeting Lyra, with her iridescent skin and musical voice, felt like a dream, something far removed from the usual rhythms of his life. He lay there for a moment, replaying the events of the evening in his mind, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It had been an incredible night. Lyra's curiosity, her endless questions about Earth's simplest customs, and the way her skin shifted in color, as her emotions rippled beneath the surface, it was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He turned over, half expecting to find her still asleep on the couch where she'd agreed to crash. But as his eyes scanned the room, he noticed something strange. The couch was empty. Jason sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, the faint fuzziness of sleep giving way to an uneasy alertness. The apartment was eerily quiet, but there was a different quality to it, a sense that something was happening just out of sight. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, stretching before padding into the living room. That's when he saw it. The space, once a messy collection of his belongings, books scattered across the coffee table, clothes draped over the back of chairs, a half-eaten pizza box from 2 nights ago, was now pristine. Everything was in perfect order, almost unsettlingly so. His books were stacked neatly, arranged by size, and the pizza box had vanished, replaced by what looked like a carefully arranged plate of fruits and something else. Some kind of alien-looking pastry? Jason blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. His heart quickened. "Lyra," he called, his voice groggy but edged with confusion. "Lyra, are you here?" A faint sound, almost like the hum of a distant melody, drifted toward him from the kitchen. He followed the sound, his bare feet making soft padding noises on the cool floor. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and as he pushed it open, the sight that greeted him was both fascinating and alarming. Lyra was standing in the middle of the kitchen, a soft glow radiating from her skin, which had taken on a pale lavender hue. Her silvery hair cascaded down her back, shimmering as she moved about with what appeared to be focused purpose. In her hands was a small, egg-shaped device that hovered just above the counter, projecting light and strange symbols into the air. Her eyes were fixed on the projections, her fingers dancing through the symbols with practiced precision. "Morning," Jason said, trying to sound casual, though his brain was screaming for answers. Lyra's head snapped up, her face breaking into a wide, radiant smile. Her skin shimmered gold, bright and warm. "Good morning, Jason. I hope you slept well." Jason glanced around the kitchen, which, like the living room, had been transformed. Everything was spotless, and the counters, once cluttered with dishes and leftover groceries, were now gleaming, adorned with what looked like small, intricate ornaments, each one glowing faintly with an inner light. I slept fine," Jason said, trying to keep up with the strangeness unfolding before him. "What's going on? Did you, clean?" "Oh yes," Lyra said cheerfully, her skin glowing brighter, as if she were pleased with her work. "It's customary to prepare the living space for the bonding. I wanted everything to be perfect for when your family arrives. I've already sent the necessary messages to Nerelthia, and my family should be here by this afternoon." Jason's stomach did a slow, queasy roll. He blinked, his mind struggling to make sense of her words. "Wait, what?" Lyra, still smiling, stepped closer, her eyes glowing with excitement. "I can't tell you how honored I am, Jason. When you invited me to stay the night, I knew you understood the significance of such an offer. To share the same space through the night, it's the most sacred of gestures among my people. It signifies a bond, a promise to share our lives together. I've sent the signal back to Nerelthia, and my parents are already en route with the ceremonial gifts. The joining ceremony can begin as soon as they arrive." Jason's mouth went dry. The room seemed to tilt slightly, his mind grasping for anything that made sense. The bonding? Ceremony? Her parents? It was as if the words were in a different language, though he understood them all too well. Wait, Jason said, holding up his hands as if to physically stop the torrent of confusion flooding his brain. "Ceremony? Bonding? What? What are you talking about?" Lyra blinked, her expression softening into one of concern. Her skin shifted from bright gold to a muted pink, a reflection of her confusion. "You mean, you didn't know? When you invited me to stay with you, you made the proposal. To share a space overnight means we are bound, Jason. A bond that cannot be undone. It is an unbreakable trust." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He stared at her, his mouth moving but no words coming out at first. I didn't know. That's not what it means here." Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and the pink hue of her skin deepened. She seemed to be processing this revelation slowly, as if it was impossible for her to fully comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. But you invited me. You offered me your home, your space. Jason took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, though panic was bubbling just beneath the surface. On Earth, it's just something you do. It's a casual thing. I didn't know it meant marriage or bonding or anything like that. Lyra stared at him, her skin shifting into a pale silver, which Jason was beginning to associate with shock or sadness. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching into something heavy and uncomfortable. The hovering device on the counter flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. "I see," Lyra said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I misunderstood." Jason winced, guilt stabbing at him. "Lyra, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to lead you on or anything. I just thought it was late, and you might want to stay instead of going back to your ship." Lyra's glowing eyes lowered, her silvery hair falling forward like a veil. Her skin, once glowing and vibrant, dimmed to a soft, muted gray. "In my culture, such an invitation is sacred," she said quietly. "You invite someone into your space for the night. It is a lifelong promise, a bond that goes beyond words." Jason rubbed the back of his neck, frustration and confusion tangling together in his mind. He wanted to fix this, to find some way to make it better, but the situation felt so far beyond anything he had ever dealt with. This wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. This was an intergalactic marriage proposal gone horribly wrong. "I didn't know," he said again, more softly this time, his voice carrying the weight of his sincerity. "I didn't know, Lyra. I would never have." Before he could finish, a soft chime echoed through the apartment. Lyra looked up, her eyes flashing with a brief spark of hope. The chime repeated, followed by a gentle, otherworldly melody that filled the air. Jason watched as Lyra's skin shifted again, this time to a pale violet, as she walked to the window and pressed her hand to the glass. "They're here," she said, her voice almost reverent. Jason's heart sank. "Who's here?" Lyra turned to face him, her expression a mixture of nervous excitement and quiet sadness. "My family. They've come to witness the bonding ceremony." Jason's mouth went dry again. His palms began to sweat. "What? What do you mean, they're here? Here, on Earth?" Lyra nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "They traveled across the stars to bless our union. They will expect." Her words trailed off as Jason stumbled back toward the couch, sinking into it as though the weight of the situation had finally collapsed on top of him. His mind raced, heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. All he knew was that an innocent invitation had somehow escalated into a full-blown, intergalactic wedding. "What do I do?" Jason muttered under his breath, half to himself, half to the universe that had so suddenly spun wildly out of his control. Lyra stepped closer, her voice gentle but laced with a kind of sadness that Jason had never heard before. "We must follow through, Jason. It is my people's way. The bond has been made." Jason looked up at her, his thoughts a jumbled mess. He wanted to protest, to explain that this wasn't what he had meant, but he could see the weight of her world in her eyes, the expectation, the love, and the deep, unbreakable trust that had already been placed in him. How could he shatter that? And as the distant hum of her family's ship grew louder outside, Jason felt the pull of inevitability sink deep into his bones. This was no longer just about him. It was about Lyra, her family, and the vast cultural chasm that now stood between them. "Okay," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We'll figure this out." Lyra's skin shifted to a soft, hopeful gold as she nodded, her eyes glowing once more. But Jason's mind was still spinning, trapped in the hurricane of what had just been set in motion. The air in Jason's apartment felt thick, charged with an intensity that seemed to hum just below the surface. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring blankly at the door, which moments ago had echoed with that strange, melodic chime. His mind raced, trying and failing to comprehend the monumental shift that had occurred in less than 24 hours. Yesterday he was a guy showing an alien visitor around Earth, and today he was apparently engaged to be married to that very alien. And now her family had arrived, the reality of the situation pressing down on him like a storm cloud. Lyra stood by the window, her posture graceful but tense, her skin a blend of soft lavender and pale gold, reflecting both her anticipation and her uncertainty. She had explained as much as she could, but even so, the depth of her culture's customs still felt alien to Jason, unfathomable in their weight and significance. Outside, through the slats of his blinds, Jason could see the sleek, shimmering ship that had descended in the parking lot just beyond his building. Unlike Lyra's modest craft, this one was large, almost ceremonial in appearance, its hull iridescent and shifting colors, like a pearl glinting under sunlight. It seemed to hum faintly, emitting a low, resonant tone that Jason could feel vibrating in his chest. He swallowed hard. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked softly, her voice trembling just slightly. Jason turned to look at her, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Not really," he admitted, his heart hammering in his chest. "But I don't think I have much of a choice." Lyra's eyes shimmered with understanding, though Jason could sense the lingering sadness in her gaze. She stepped toward him, her movements smooth and deliberate, and placed a cool hand on his arm. Her touch was both calming and strange, a reminder of just how different their worlds were, even if, in that moment, she looked almost entirely human. "I promise," she said, her voice laced with sincerity, "my family will honor you. They will welcome you with open hearts. This is not just about tradition, it's about unity, about trust. You have given me the greatest gift in our culture by offering me your space. They will see that." Jason nodded, though the words did little to ease the anxiety gnawing at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being swept into something far beyond his control, like being caught in a current he hadn't even realized was there until it was too late to swim back. Before he could respond, the melodic chime at the door echoed again, this time accompanied by a soft pulse of light from the ship outside. Lyra's face brightened, her skin shifting to a warm gold. "They're here." Jason's stomach twisted into a knot as Lyra moved to the door, her steps light and graceful, like she was walking on air. She paused for a brief moment before opening it, her hand hovering just above the handle. Then, with a deep breath, she pulled the door wide. Jason stood up quickly, not sure what to expect, his heart pounding in his chest. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight that met his eyes. The Nerelthians, Lyra's family, entered in a slow, deliberate procession. There were 5 of them, and though they shared Lyra's humanoid form, each one seemed to radiate an aura of power and majesty that Jason had never encountered before. They were tall, towering over him by at least a foot, and their iridescent skin shimmered in the light, shifting through hues of blue, purple, and gold as they moved. Each one wore intricate garments, robes of flowing, luminescent fabric that seemed to be alive, constantly shifting and moving, as if woven from light itself. At the front of the group was a man, clearly the patriarch of the family. His skin glowed with a soft, regal silver, and his violet eyes held an intensity that made Jason want to look away, though he couldn't. His presence was commanding, not through aggression, but through sheer gravitas. Behind him was a woman with the same striking beauty as Lyra, though her skin was a deep, swirling violet, a color that seemed to pulse with energy. Their features were delicate but sharp, their eyes holding a depth of wisdom and experience that made Jason feel as if he were standing before royalty. "Jason," Lyra said softly, her voice breaking the tension, "this is my father Selen and my mother Varelia." Jason blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. "Hi," he stammered, holding out his hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of greeting. Selen's eyes flicked to Jason's extended hand, then back to his face, and for a moment, Jason feared he had made some terrible faux pas. But then, slowly, Selen took Jason's hand in both of his grip firm but not overpowering. There was a strange, almost electric sensation that passed between them, not painful, but enough to make the hair on the back of Jason's neck stand up. "Greetings, Jason of Earth," Selen said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the same musical quality that Lyra's did, though his was richer, more commanding. "You have honored my daughter with your bond. We are here to celebrate the union you have initiated." Jason swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Yeah, about that." He glanced at Lyra, hoping she would step in and explain the misunderstanding. But before he could say anything more, Varelia, Lyra's mother, stepped forward. "You must forgive our excitement," Varelia said, her voice softer but still carrying that otherworldly resonance. "This is a joyous occasion for us. Our customs may be unfamiliar to you, but we come with open hearts. You are now one of us." Jason's head spun. One of us? How had this spiraled so completely out of control? Before he could even begin to formulate a response, two younger Nerelthians stepped forward, Lyra's siblings, he assumed. One of them, a man with skin that shimmered like liquid gold, offered Jason a wide smile. "I'm Rylan," he said, his voice much more casual than his parents. "Lyra's older brother. Welcome to the family, man." Yet Jason mumbled, forcing a smile as he shook Rylan's hand. "Family. Great." "And this is Aella, my younger sister," Lyra added, gesturing toward the other woman, whose skin glowed a vibrant pink. Ella's eyes sparkled with excitement, and she immediately embraced Jason, catching him off guard. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," Aella exclaimed, her voice lilting with joy. "You have no idea how long Lyra has waited for this. She spoke about Earth for years before the exchange program even started." Jason glanced at Lyra, who looked back at him with a mixture of warmth and anxiety. Her skin had settled into a soft gold, but Jason could see the uncertainty flickering behind her eyes. She hadn't expected this either, at least not the way it was unfolding. Thanks," Jason said awkwardly, feeling Ella's enthusiasm wash over him like a tidal wave. He was still processing the fact that he had unknowingly proposed to an alien, and now her entire family was here, treating him like some kind of intergalactic fiancé. The absurdity of it all would have been hilarious if it weren't so terrifying. Selen, sensing the weight of the moment, raised a hand, silencing the room. "We must proceed with the formalities," he said solemnly. "There is much to be done before the ceremony." Jason's pulse quickened. "Ceremony," he repeated, the word slipping out before he could stop it. Varelia nodded, her eyes softening with maternal warmth. "Yes, the bonding ceremony. It is a sacred ritual among our people. By sharing space with Lyra through the night, you have already initiated the first step. The ceremony itself is merely a formality and affirmation of the bond that has been created." Jason's stomach dropped. This was happening too fast. Too much, too soon. He looked at Lyra again, hoping she would jump in, tell them it was all a big misunderstanding. But she stood there, her skin shimmering with an odd mix of colors: gold, lavender, and faint traces of blue. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that she didn't want to stop it. She wanted this. Before Jason could fully process the implications, Selen gestured to the ship outside. "Come," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We have brought the necessary ceremonial artifacts. The bonding is a joyous occasion, and we must prepare the space appropriately." Jason's legs felt like they were made of lead as he followed the group outside. The Nerelthian ship loomed large in the parking lot, its iridescent surface glowing faintly under the morning sun. As they approached, the ship's door slid open with a soft hiss, and a ramp extended to the ground. Inside, the ship was even more magnificent than Jason had expected. The interior glowed with soft, ambient light, and the walls seemed to pulse gently, as if the entire structure was alive. Ornate carvings adorned the walls, each one depicting scenes of what Jason assumed were Nerelthian myths or histories. The air was cool, and there was a faint, floral scent that reminded him of jasmine. "Please make yourself comfortable," Selen said, gesturing to a series of low, cushioned seats arranged around a central platform. "We will begin the preparations shortly." Jason sat down, feeling like he had been dropped into some kind of surreal dream. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced with thoughts of escape, of finding a way to explain the misunderstanding without completely offending Lyra and her family. But every time he looked at Lyra, saw the hope and warmth in her eyes, the words stuck in his throat. He didn't want to hurt her. Lyra took a seat beside him, her skin glowing a soft, comforting gold. "Are you all right?" she asked gently, her hand resting lightly on his. Jason forced a smile, though inside he felt like he was free falling. "Yeah," he said, though the word tasted like a lie. "Just trying to wrap my head around all of this." Lyra nodded, her expression understanding. "I know it's overwhelming, but once the ceremony is complete, things will be much clearer. You'll see." Jason wasn't so sure. The preparations for the ceremony were nothing short of breathtaking. Jason watched in a daze as Lyra's family worked together in perfect harmony, arranging intricate symbols on the floor with glowing stones and weaving luminescent fabrics into beautiful, ethereal designs. The air inside the ship seemed to thrum with energy, the very walls pulsing in time with some ancient rhythm that Jason couldn't quite place. It was beautiful and terrifying. As the ceremony began to take shape, Jason found himself drifting into a kind of numb acceptance. There was no escaping this, at least not without causing irreparable harm. And despite the whirlwind of confusion and panic, there was a part of him, buried deep, that was fascinated by it all. The Nerelthians' customs, their rituals, their deep reverence for this bond. It was unlike anything he had ever known. But he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for this commitment, this lifelong promise that had been thrust upon him without warning. He wasn't ready to become part of an alien family, to embrace a culture he barely understood. And yet, as he sat there, watching Lyra move gracefully among her family, her skin glowing with joy and love, he realized something else. He wasn't ready to let her go either. As the ceremony approached, Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what he was going to do. All he knew was that he was in too deep, and there was no easy way out. The days following the bonding ceremony were a blur of emotions for Jason. Everything had happened so quickly: Lyra's arrival, the misunderstood proposal, and then the whirlwind arrival of her family, sweeping him into a culture that was both fascinating and overwhelming. He had expected panic to set in, to feel trapped by the weight of a commitment he hadn't intended to make. But as the initial shock began to wear off, Jason found himself feeling something entirely unexpected. He wasn't as upset as he thought he'd be. In fact, as the days turned into weeks, Jason realized something that surprised him. He liked Lyra, really liked her. At first he had tried to rationalize his growing feelings. Lyra was unlike anyone he had ever met, exotic and ethereal in her appearance, but more than that, she was kind, thoughtful, and deeply curious about the world around her. Every conversation they had seemed to unlock new layers of understanding, not just about her culture, but about himself. She made him think about things differently, in ways that felt profound and exciting. He found himself looking forward to the moments they spent together, whether it was sharing a quiet breakfast in his kitchen or taking walks through the city as she marveled at the strange, chaotic beauty of Earth. Jason hadn't expected it, but Lyra had a way of making the world feel bigger, more vibrant. It wasn't just the novelty of her alien nature, either, though there was certainly something captivating about the way her skin would shift in color, reflecting her emotions in real time. There was something deeper about her that drew him in. A softness, a warmth that felt incredibly genuine. She cared about him deeply. That much was clear from the way she looked at him, her eyes glowing with affection and trust, the way her presence seemed to calm him when the enormity of their situation threatened to overwhelm him. And as the days passed, Jason's fear of the bond they had created began to fade, replaced by something else, something more tender. He found himself lingering in their shared moments, his heart fluttering with an unfamiliar sense of possibility. One evening, about 3 weeks after the ceremony, Jason sat on the couch, watching Lyra as she moved around the living room. She was rearranging a small collection of decorative stones that her family had gifted them during the bonding ceremony, humming softly to herself. Her skin glowed a pale lavender, a color Jason had come to recognize as her peaceful state. She was calm, content, and Jason couldn't help but smile as he watched her. "What are you thinking about?" Lyra asked, catching his gaze. Her voice was soft, melodic, as always, but there was something else in it tonight, an intimacy that sent a warm shiver down his spine. Jason blinked, realizing he had been staring. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture that was becoming all too familiar in her presence. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now, but in a good way, I think." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her violet eyes narrowing in curiosity. "Different? How so?" Jason hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words. He wasn't used to talking about his feelings, especially not feelings like these. But Lyra had a way of making it easy, like he could be honest with her in a way that felt safe. I mean, I didn't expect any of this, he admitted, leaning back against the cushions. When I invited you to stay that night, I had no idea what it meant. I thought I was just being friendly. But now, looking back, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I got to know you. Lyra's skin shifted to a soft pink, a color Jason knew by now to signify affection. She smiled, her expression gentle but filled with a warmth that made Jason's heart race. I'm glad too, Jason. Even though things did not go as either of us expected, I have found joy in our bond. Jason swallowed, his chest tightening with emotion. There was something about the way she said it, so simple, so sincere. He wanted to tell her what he had been feeling for days now, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain the shift that had happened inside him? How could he make her understand that, despite everything, he had started to fall for her? Lyra, he said softly, his voice low and hesitant. There's something I've been wanting to say. Lyra's eyes locked onto his, her expression attentive. Her skin glowed with soft anticipation, a mix of lavender and gold swirling across her form. What is it, Jason? Jason took a deep breath, feeling his pulse quicken. He wasn't great at this, at laying his feelings bare. But there was no point in holding back anymore. He had to say it, even if it scared him. I think. I've fallen for you, he said, the words tumbling out in a rush before he could second-guess himself. I didn't mean to, and I know this whole thing started off as a misunderstanding, but I really care about you, Lyra, more than I thought I would. For a moment, there was silence. Jason held his breath, watching Lyra closely, waiting for her reaction. Her skin shimmered with a delicate mixture of gold and pink, her eyes wide with surprise. She didn't speak right away, and Jason's heart pounded in his chest, a nervous thrum that echoed in his ears. Finally, Lyra stepped closer, her gaze softening, her skin glowing a radiant gold. Jason, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I have felt the same for some time now. I did not want to pressure you, knowing that our cultures are so different, but my feelings for you have only grown since we first met. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't expected her to say that, hadn't realized how much he needed to hear it. Relief and joy flooded through him, and before he could stop himself, he reached out, pulling her gently into his arms. Lyra melted into the embrace, her body soft and warm against his, her skin glowing with vibrant pinks and golds. Her scent, a delicate floral fragrance, filled his senses, and for a moment, the world seemed to fall away. It was just the two of them, wrapped in each other's arms, the bond between them deepening in ways that went far beyond words. Jason pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes. I don't know what this means for us, he said, his voice low and honest. I don't know how this works, being from two different worlds, but I do know that I want to figure it out, together. Lyra smiled, her eyes shimmering with tears, though Jason could tell they were tears of happiness. We will figure it out, she said softly. Together. Jason leaned in then, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and affection, and pressed his lips gently against hers. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, but as Lyra responded, a surge of warmth rushed through him. Her lips were cool and soft, and the way her body fit against his felt perfect, like they were two pieces of a puzzle finally snapping into place. For a long moment they stayed like that, lost in each other, the connection between them deepening with every second. Jason's hands slid down to Lyra's waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. He could feel the soft hum of her skin, the way it vibrated gently against him, and it made his heart race even faster. Lyra's fingers tangled in his hair, her touch gentle but insistent, and Jason felt a wave of desire wash over him, desire that had been building for days, weeks, ever since they had first started spending time together. He hadn't realized how strong it had become until now, with her in his arms, her lips moving softly against his. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their foreheads pressed together as they tried to steady themselves. Lyra's skin was glowing a brilliant gold, her eyes bright with emotion. I've wanted this for so long, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. To be with you, like this. Jason smiled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "Me too." The days that followed were filled with a new kind of closeness between them. Jason and Lyra's relationship shifted, deepened. They were no longer just two people navigating a strange, unexpected situation. They were partners, bound together not just by circumstance but by choice. Jason found himself falling deeper for her with every passing day, drawn to the way she saw the world, the way she cared so deeply about everything and everyone around her. Their bond, which had once been a source of confusion and fear for Jason, had become something he cherished. He couldn't imagine his life without her anymore. The idea of waking up without seeing her smile, of not hearing her soft, melodic laughter as they joked about Earth's strange customs, none of it seemed possible. She had become a part of his life, inextricably linked to him in ways that went beyond even their cultural differences. And with that closeness came a physical connection as well. Their kisses grew more frequent, more passionate, and eventually, their relationship moved beyond just kisses. The first time they made love, it was slow, tender, and filled with the same sense of wonder that had marked every part of their relationship. Lyra's touch was gentle, her skin glowing with soft, radiant colors that reflected her emotions. The connection they shared wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something that felt almost spiritual, as if their bond had transcended the boundaries of their worlds. In those moments, Jason realized that what he had feared most, this unintentional bond, this intergalactic marriage, had become the most beautiful thing in his life. He had fallen in love with Lyra, truly and deeply, and he no longer questioned what it meant or where it would lead. All he knew was that he didn't want to let her go.
The days had begun to take on a rhythm, a kind of gentle flow that Jason had never expected to feel in the aftermath of such a whirlwind beginning. It had been over a month since Lyra had entered his life, since she had come from the stars, turning his world upside down with her quiet presence and deep, otherworldly customs. In the time that had passed, what had started as a misunderstanding had blossomed into something beautiful, something real. Jason had fallen for her, completely. And now, as he stood in the warm light of the early morning sun, watching Lyra move gracefully through his apartment, he knew without a doubt that he wanted her. Everything about their relationship, from the strange cultural rituals to the quiet moments they shared over breakfast, felt right. The confusion, the fear, the uncertainty that had gripped him in the beginning had faded like the distant echo of a bad dream. In its place was something softer, something steady and reassuring love. Lyra was sitting on the floor by the window, her iridescent skin shimmering with soft golds and silvers as she arranged the last of the ceremonial artifacts her family had left behind. They had returned to Nerelthia shortly after the bonding ceremony, giving Jason and Lyra the space they needed to figure things out on their own terms. That had been a relief. Jason wasn't sure he could have handled more of their grand gestures and high expectations right away. He needed time. And so did Lyra. Despite her deep feelings for him, Jason could tell that Lyra had been navigating the same emotional landscape he had. She had grown up in a world where relationships were meticulously arranged, where bonds were sacred and unbreakable, but now she was learning what it meant to build a connection with someone on more human terms, slowly, with care, learning to meet in the middle between their two cultures. Jason smiled as he crossed the room to her, sitting down beside her on the floor. The early morning light made her silver hair glow like strands of spun moonlight, and when she looked up at him, her violet eyes shining with warmth, his heart skipped a beat. "You're up early," she said, her voice carrying that soft, musical lilt that always made him feel at ease. "I couldn't sleep," Jason replied, reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair away from her face. "I kept thinking about us." Lyra tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly with curiosity. "Is something troubling you?" Jason shook his head, chuckling softly. "No, not at all. Just the opposite, actually. I've been thinking about how much things have changed, and how happy I am with you." Lyra's skin shifted to a glowing gold, the color of affection and joy, and she reached out to take his hand. Her touch was warm, her fingers cool against his skin. "I feel the same," she said quietly. "You have brought so much into my life, Jason. Things I never expected. Joy, curiosity, and love." The word hung in the air between them, a soft, quiet truth that neither of them had spoken aloud until now. Jason's heart swelled at the sound of it, and he squeezed her hand gently, pulling her a little closer. "I love you too," he said, the words coming easily now, the truth of them resonating in his chest. I didn't think I would ever feel this way, but here we are. Lyra smiled, her skin glowing even brighter. It was always there, I think she said softly. Even in the beginning, when everything felt uncertain. I felt drawn to you. There was a connection even before we understood it. Jason nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. He leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers, their breaths mingling in the quiet of the morning. I don't know what the future holds for us, he murmured, his voice soft. But I do know that I want to figure it out with you, whatever that means, whatever it takes. Lyra closed her eyes, leaning into the touch, her fingers tightening around his. We will figure it out, she whispered, together. For a long moment they stayed like that, wrapped in the quiet warmth of their shared space, the bond between them deepening with every breath. Jason felt a profound sense of peace wash over him, the kind of peace that came from knowing, deep in his bones, that this was where he belonged, with her. In the weeks that followed, their relationship grew even stronger, rooted in trust, understanding, and a kind of effortless affection that neither of them had anticipated. They spent their days exploring the city, wandering through parks, museums, and hidden corners of the urban sprawl, sharing pieces of their worlds with each other in ways that felt both new and comforting. Lyra's fascination with Earth never waned. Every new experience was met with a sense of awe that Jason found endlessly endearing. They often returned to the rooftop bar where they had first started getting to know each other. It had become their spot in unspoken sanctuary, where they could watch the city lights flicker on at dusk and talk for hours about everything and nothing at all. Jason would sit there, his arm around Lyra, watching the way her skin caught the light, shifting through shades of pink and gold as she listened to him talk about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. And in return, Lyra shared stories of Norelthia, of her family, and of the quiet, structured life she had left behind to come to Earth. It was in those moments that Jason realized how much Lyra had sacrificed to be with him. She had left behind not just her planet, but the life she had always known, the expectations, the traditions, the carefully planned future. In a way, they had both taken a leap of faith, stepping into something neither of them fully understood, but now, more than ever, Jason was grateful for that leap. He couldn't imagine his life without her. One night, after a particularly long day exploring a new part of the city, Jason and Lyra returned to his apartment, exhausted but happy. Lyra had spent the day marveling at Earth's natural beauty, the rivers, the forests, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, and now she was sprawled out on the couch, her eyes half closed as she listened to Jason talk. I never realized how much I took all this for granted, Jason said, leaning back in his chair as he looked out the window at the night sky. I've lived here my whole life, but seeing it through your eyes, it's like I'm experiencing it all for the first time. Lyra smiled, her skin glowing with a soft golden hue. You've given me a gift, Jason, not just by sharing your world, but by allowing me to see it through your perspective. I've learned so much from you about Earth, about love, about what it means to be truly connected to someone. Jason's chest tightened with emotion, and he crossed the room to sit beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. She rested her head against his chest, her body fitting perfectly against his, and for a moment they simply sat there in silence, wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence. I want to share everything with you, Jason whispered after a while. My life, my world, everything. Lyra looked up at him, her violet eyes filled with love and trust. And I want the same, she replied softly. To share my life with you for as long as you'll have me. Jason smiled, leaning down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. Forever, he murmured, his voice filled with certainty. I'll have you forever, Lyra. As the weeks turned into months, Jason and Lyra settled into a comfortable, loving routine. The bond they had created, one that had begun as a misunderstanding, had grown into something unbreakable. They navigated the challenges of their cultural differences with patience and humor, learning from each other, growing together in ways neither of them had expected. There were still moments of confusion, still times when Jason found himself stumbling over the nuances of Norelthian customs, or when Lyra struggled to understand the chaos of human relationships. But every challenge was met with love, with understanding, and with a deep, unshakable trust. Their physical connection, too, deepened over time. What had started as tentative touches and soft kisses blossomed into a full, passionate relationship. They made love often, their bodies entwined in a dance that felt both familiar and new each time. Lyra's touch was always gentle, her skin glowing with vibrant colors that reflected the depth of her emotions, and Jason found himself losing track of time when they were together, caught up in the intensity of their connection. In those quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to fade away and it was just the two of them, Jason knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen love, chosen to embrace the strange and wonderful path that life had set before him. And he knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he and Lyra would face them together. Their love had been born from a misunderstanding, but it had grown into something more, something powerful, beautiful, and enduring. And as Jason lay beside Lyra, watching her sleep peacefully in the soft glow of the moonlight, he realized that this was what he had been searching for all along, a love that transcended worlds, a bond that could never be broken. A new beginning. Together,